It's no secret, Australia is a country of renovators. We spend more than $1 billion each month sprucing up our homes with shiny new kitchens and bathrooms. But what's not well known is many of the young tradies who cut up the engineered stone to make the benches and vanities we so desire have been handed a death sentence. That's because these man-made products contain silica, and its dust, when inhaled, is a killer. In fact, over time, it's considered as toxic as asbestos. In this joint 60 Minutes, The Age and Sydney Morning Herald investigation, Adele Ferguson reveals startling information that while many workers say they've been unaware of the dangers, not so the manufacturers of these products.
This is not easy to watch. Ken Parker is slowly suffocating to death. And the awful truth is he knows little can be done to save him.
So this is just like a snorkel. Put your lips over the top and teeth on the prong.
At 47, the stonemason's lungs have been destroyed by tiny toxic dust particles.
Start peddling as of now.
Ken has silicosis.
Good.
An incurable disease that means he has to fight for every single breath he takes.
Okay, so we'll stop the test now, all right?
Good work.
Tonight, a scandal that should not be happening. How our love of shiny kitchen and bathroom benchtops is driving a silicosis epidemic. How all over Australia, stonemasons are getting sick and dying simply because they went to work. And most outrageous of all, how the company that pioneered the manufacturing of the benchtops knew the product was deadly, but did very little about it.
Pull them up. That's it. Stand up.
A dad to 3 beautiful girls, Josh Hunt should be in the prime of his life. But at 31, this young tradie is dying. Have you noticed the symptoms kicking in?
Yeah, no, definitely shortness of breath, yeah. Most activities I do, yeah.
And do you get tired?
Yeah, no.
And you can't work?
No. It's taken its toll. It's taken, like I said, it's taken everything from me.
Josh was diagnosed with silicosis in 2018, 13 years after he took a job as a stonemason on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. What was it like when you first started there?
Busy. It was pretty full on. It was big days, long days, and yeah, it was dusty.
The beginning of Josh's career coincided with the explosion in demand in Australia for man-made or engineered stone, as it's known.
When I first started, it was a lot of granite. And then about a year in, it just turned to engineered stone. It just flooded the market. It absolutely killed the granite and the marble, yeah.
There was one product that captured the market more than any other.
Design your dream with Caesarstone.
Originally produced in Israel, Caesarstone was first imported into Australia in the late 1990s.
So you can express yourself in any way you choose.
It became popular because it was a shinier, more durable alternative to marble and granite. Best of all, it was cheaper.
You're probably familiar with this stuff. It's called composite stone. It is just so popular these days.
As demand surged and inspired countless competitors, Tradies all over the country worked at record pace, cutting the slabs into kitchen bench tops and bathroom vanities. There was little concern for safety.
When I first started, no one had a mask on. I didn't think anything of it really. We got 7 different blokes in the factory, all using grinders or grinding the stone all at once. And in the factory with no ventilation, you got one roller door open, or one half open, and then you got some fans, and they're all blowing from each workstation at each other because they're trying to blow the dust away from each other, from them into the other person. It's just, there were days that you couldn't even see, yeah.
Hard, dusty. I used to tell people it was like working in hell. You're covered in it. It's in everything. It's in your clothes, in your skin, in your eyes. Car, take it home with you. It's just everywhere.
Ken Parker started working with engineered stone at a factory in Sydney in the early 2000s. It was a dirty job, but he was good at it, often cutting 40 kitchen bench tops a day. What was the attitude to safety?
The attitude to safety was basically non-existent. The focus was on making money. Just hurry up, boys, get it done. Safety was definitely nowhere near the top of the list.
But it should have been. What Ken, Josh, and many others in the industry didn't know is that unlike marble and granite, engineered stone contains more than 80% silica, and the dust it produces is deadly. Could you taste it?
Oh yeah, definitely. It still tastes it now. Yeah.
What's it like?
Just like gritty paste. Yeah, it's like a paste would form in your mouth. Yeah.
And you still have that sensation now?
I can still smell it, I can still taste it now.
The silica dust Josh Hunt inhaled throughout his short career is now embedded in the lining of his lungs. Every single day, the simple things in life, like playing with his kids, get harder and harder. He's been told he'll be lucky to make it to 40. That's a shocking diagnosis.
What do you do? Yeah, we're here now.
I've never seen such young people with silicosis. I mean, I think my youngest is 27.
How is it for you having to tell someone who's relatively young they've got silicosis?
It's really distressing. I could not believe it when I saw these patients with such severe disease.
Each of these x-rays, and there are thousands more of them in doctors' rooms around the country, tells a horror story of Australian tradies whose lungs and lives have been destroyed by silicosis. Lung disease specialist Professor Deborah Yates says this epidemic simply should not be happening.
People say that they feel they can't get enough air in. It's insidious, and it is like being sort of strangled, and it is like having your lungs contracting from inside. So it's a sort of hidden scourge.
And what's the worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario is you can die very quickly, very, very quickly. As you can see, he's really got quite severe silicosis.
What angers Professor Yates is that silicosis is totally preventable. But instead of being eliminated, rates of the disease have been increasing in Australia for the past decade. And by far and away, it's because of our love of engineered stone. The professor says there's one company that bears more responsibility than any other. What role does Caesarstone play in all this, given they were the first to come to Australia with the shiny bench tops?
Yes, I think this is a problem. Caesarstone were the first to actually market artificial stone in Australia. As far as I know, they did know about this sort of hazard at that particular time. But it's the small companies, the small ones who are cutting the bench tops, who've been totally unaware of this particular issue. And that should have been addressed and should still be addressed, actually.
Installed in kitchens, this man-made engineered stone is benign, but it's not when it's being customised to fit in place. Even now, many Australian tradies who cut this stuff up don't know just how dangerous the product is. Effectively, they've been handed a death sentence for showing up to work.
No one ever said straight out, this stuff is going to kill you.
Take a deep, smooth breath in to the top and make
For the first 10 years of his career as a stonemason, Ken seemed fit and healthy, oblivious to damage being done to his lungs by working with engineered stone.
Big one in.
But 3.5 years ago, he was diagnosed with silicosis, and every day since, his condition has been deteriorating. Now, life is hell.
Basically, the simplest way to put it is that I can walk and I can talk, but I can't walk and talk because I run out of oxygen and then I'll have to stop. And yeah, that's probably the simplest way to put it. And everything else from there is limited to that point.
Did they give you a life expectancy?
Yeah, I think my official life expectancy was 5 to 10 years.
Ken Parker and Josh Hunt are just two of many Australian workers whose futures are bleak. As the pioneer of manufactured stone bench tops, you'd think Caesarstone would want to protect those who work with it. But as you'll see, rather than issue clear warnings, the company went to great lengths to cover up the dangers. They tried to gag you.
Yeah, but I'm not afraid of them.
In Israel, you only need to open your eyes to know crafting stone has been going on for thousands of years. It's not surprising then to learn this is also the land where man-made, engineered stone benchtops were pioneered. But the multinational company responsible for them, Caesarstone, now finds itself accused not only of a global silicosis epidemic, but also of a shocking cover-up. How would you describe the company's actions?
I think it's outrageous. I think they're not taking responsibility for something that they created. This is a cause of severe diseases and death.
Long before anyone else, Professor Mordecai Kramer had an inkling about the dangers of Caesarstone when there was a dramatic spike in the number of silicosis patients at his hospital in Tel Aviv.
When I saw 1, 2, 3, then I said, something is wrong here. It's unusual. In the past years, we didn't have any silicosis cases in Israel. This was a very rare disease. But since 2006, we started to see rolling in one patient after another, and very severe cases that needed lung transplantation. And then we found that all of them were working with the new stone, the new engineered stone of Caesarstone that was made in Israel. Patients are all over the country.
Caesarstone was already well established and hugely successful when Professor Kramer first became alarmed. It had begun selling its slabs in 1987 and by the early 2000s had a virtual monopoly in Israel. The company was also exporting its products around the world. including to Australia and the US. And sadly, more and more stonemasons were falling sick.
The price is too high. We lose people, patients, workers because of this stone.
So it's really like a death stone.
Yeah, it's a death stone. It's definitely a death stone. It's very difficult to tear the lung out.
The company says from the 1990s, it included warnings about the risk of silicosis in its safety data sheets. However, it wasn't until 2010 Caesarstone started attaching warning labels to the engineered stone products it was selling. But it was a cynical exercise. The small warning sticker acknowledged the danger the product posed, but the writing was barely readable. And it was too late for the workers who'd been exposed to Caesarstone for the more than 20 years it had been available. Why do you think they took until 2010 to put a warning on?
This money, it's billions of dollars, not just in Israel, it's all over the world. It's, money versus health of simple people, workers. It's a shame, it's a shame.
Profit before people.
Yeah, exactly.
A year after the tiny warning labels appeared, Caesarstone made another admission. In preparation for listing the company on the US stock exchange, buried in its prospectus was a brief mention of silicosis-related lawsuits filed against the company. But if there were any lingering questions about what the company did or didn't know about the dangers, 12 months later, it was left in no doubt. In 2012, 15 years after treating his first silicosis patient, Professor Kramer released a study officially linking Caesarstone to the outbreak of the disease in Israel. He expected the company to work with him to eliminate the danger. Instead, it tried to silence him to protect its booming empire.
Yeah, they threatened, they take us to court. They take the best lawyers in the country, the most expensive. They send me a warning. If you continue to mention Caesarstone, we'll get you to court.
So they tried to gag you, essentially.
Yeah. But eventually, I continue with the publications, and we did a lot of studies about it, and they didn't continue with the lawsuit. If you will publish this interview, maybe they will call again. But I'm not afraid of them.
Professor Kramer was the first to sound the alarm about Caesarstone, but he certainly wasn't alone in wanting to warn the world. What motivates you to be an activist on this?
I think that anybody in my position who went through it himself, it's his duty as a human being to try and save other people. It's just a natural human thing to do.
Yigal Rosman hasn't worked since 1997 after developing silicosis during the 5 years he was a stonemason in Israel. Every year since then, the 61-year-old's condition has worsened. Now, even the most basic tasks are nearly impossible. In 2014, overwhelmed by the horror of his own deterioration, Yigal wrote to the Australian government and other politicians around the world, trying to alert them to the dangers of Caesarstone. He explained his diagnosis and attached Professor Kramer's study. The response he received from the relevant minister was dismissive.
I was very upset with their reply. They totally disregarded it.
They fobbed you off.
Yes, I was upset because in Australia there was a chance to stop this pandemic. And if they took it seriously, they could have saved many lives.
By then, Australia was Caesarstone's second biggest market, generating over $100 million a year from its shiny, colourful stone. But no one here heeded the warnings. A disaster of disease was about to unfold.
It's a disgrace that after all of these years, all of this knowledge that has passed about the dangers of silica, that we have hundreds and hundreds of young Australian men who are contracting silicosis.
Silicosis is a cruel disease that ravages the bodies of sufferers. In 2018, a few months before he died, 36-year-old stonemason Anthony White bravely revealed how horrible it is. It was the first time the disease had been publicly linked to engineered stone in Australia, and it shocked politicians into promising immediate action to clean up the industry. Despite the assurances, though, 5 years on, little has changed.
We've got dust build up everywhere where they're supposed to get a drink, build up on the outside of the shed.
In factories and work sites around the country, where the cutting and grinding takes place, tradies still aren't being properly protected from deadly silica dust.
No control measures to stop the workers breathing silica dust in.
It's as simple as this. The regulators are failing to do their job.
We now have one of the highest rates of silicosis in the world. And we have to ask ourselves, as a society, where have we gone wrong? And I think the regulators have a lot of questions to answer.
Barrister Spiro Zougonatis represents hundreds of silicosis sufferers who've taken legal action against their employers and the manufacturers of engineered stone products. Unfortunately, his business is booming, and that means he spends most of his time at the Dust Diseases Tribunal.
There's no point in having rules and regulations about dust levels and about ventilation and about masks if those are not enforced. There seems to be a perennial failure of regulators in stepping in and inspecting factories and doing what should be done, issuing breach notices and, if necessary, shutting the factories down.
When it comes to incompetence, Safe Work New South Wales gives the word added meaning. 60 Minutes has trawled through thousands of pages of documents that reveal this regulator isn't doing its job. In the last 2 years, it's received dozens of tip-offs and complaints about silicosis-related breaches in workplaces. But the response of Safe Work New South Wales has been nothing short of negligent. In some cases, it told the offending companies when it would come and inspect their work sites. On other occasions, it didn't even bother to carry out inspections at all. It's little wonder many companies breached the safety rules over and over again. One of them was where Din Tran worked. 7 months ago, doctors gave Din terrible news. He had 8 months to live. Today, a slow shuffle around the street he lives in is a painful struggle. When he moved to Australia for a better life, he could never have imagined his job as a stonemason would kill him. Did you know it was dangerous?
When I start the job, I don't know the danger. But after I know, but when I know it's too late, yeah.
Din's employer, Exquisite Marble and Granite in Western Sydney, had a disgraceful record for exposing workers to significant levels of silica dust. Even after Din was diagnosed with silicosis, it was caught breaching safety regulations multiple times. Exquisite Marble and Granite closed down at the end of last year, but only because the owner himself contracted silicosis. Tethered to his oxygen machine, Din knows his days are limited. His greatest task now is finding the words to tell his 2 young children he's dying.
Yeah, but I don't know how. Now they're too young. I can't look after for them then anymore.
Do you think Safe Work let down Mr. Tran?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Safe Work New South Wales has let down Mr. Tran and his family and community at large.
Sophie Kotsis is the New South Wales Shadow Minister for Work, Health and Safety and is so appalled by Safe Work New South Wales' ineptitude, she called for an inquiry to sort it out.
We are seeing thousands of incidents that are not being considered, they're not being looked at by the safety regulator, so it's business as usual. So these employers are not going to take anything they say seriously because nothing's happening. They're not being fined, they're not being prosecuted, they're not being taken to task.
But it's not only New South Wales. All over Australia, dodgy work sites are being ignored by safety regulators. You worked in one company for 13 years. How often did the regulators come around?
I've never seen WorkSafe for 8 years come into our factory. And then when they did start coming in, they were the bosses were pre-warned that they were coming, so you could get your factory up to scratch. You could sweep up, you could have disposable masks on every person if you wanted to. You could put on a show for them, yeah. And that's how the industry is.
Father of 3, Josh Hunt, spent his entire career at Willis Brothers. We've been given video, filmed only last week, that shows a Willis Brothers workshop in Queensland covered in deadly silica dust. It includes damning vision of the evidence being washed away.
While we're at the gate, he had him running around with hoses, trying to make it look compliant.
I think it's incumbent on governments to find out why the regulators are missing this. And let's remember, in this country, our track record with toxic substances such as asbestos is poor. And here we are yet again in 2023, we have another problem on our hands of catastrophic scale. It's happening again.
But the regulators aren't just dropping the ball when it comes to protecting those working with engineered stone. It's happening beneath our cities as well.
I know that the exposure limits are being breached on a very regular basis.
When Craig Bennett suits up for his job at one of Brisbane's biggest infrastructure projects, he looks more like an astronaut than a tunneller. But as one of the growing number of tunnel workers around Australia who've been diagnosed with silicosis, these are the lengths he has to go to be safe underground.
It's a silent killer. There's a lot of us out there with it.
How many do you know?
I could name 10 right now.
But you think there's more than that?
For sure, yes.
The surge in silicosis cases in Australia isn't just coming from tradies who cut engineered stone for home renovations. Workers building traffic and train tunnels in our cities are also at risk. Craig, who's worked underground for 30 years, says it's especially dangerous when the drilling is through sandstone because it contains up to 90% silica, a level toxic to humans.
It's like you could feel it and at times taste it. And when you got to the surface and you removed your mask and you looked at it, it was black. I mean, when you pulled it apart, you could see that it penetrated it. And this may only be 2 hours into your shift.
The pace and scale of Australia's current infrastructure boom is without question impressive. But it comes with a hidden cost.
Our taxpayer dollars are hard at work, unfortunately exposing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of construction workers to a deadly dust every day.
Dan Walton is the National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union.
What we know with these tunnel jobs being racing along, there's so many and there's a long pipeline of work, that construction companies are doing everything they possibly can to get the jobs done as fast as they can. And when we know people rush to try and get things finished quickly, we know that corners are cut and that they turn a blind eye to certain problems, and safety is clearly one of these issues at risk.
Dan says there are safety breaches happening at some of Australia's most prominent projects, including Sydney's $16.8 billion WestConnex. Part of the project, the Rozelle Interchange, is managed by global construction giant John Holland. Last year, the AWU started monitoring the air levels in those tunnels and found alarming problems. In some areas, it says the ventilation was so poor, dust was being carried down the passages. Even more disturbing, dust levels significantly higher than the workplace exposure standard were recorded. But Dan Walton says when the union told John Holland about the problems, their monitors were banned from the site.
So the sad thing, and what we think is taking place now, John Holland was the first to lead off on this. We started getting up on site with our dust equipment, and they then, after our third visit, have blocked us.
And you're confident that the dust levels are unsafe?
Absolutely. I think if we were able to get in with our specialist equipment, if monitoring took place more regularly across each and every site, I know that the exposure limits are being breached on a very regular basis.
Craig Bennett has no doubt exposure limits were breached in the tunnels he worked in. 3 years after being told he has advanced silicosis, Craig is now trying to outsmart and outlive the disease. But cruelly, he has no option but to continue working in the industry that failed to keep him safe. You were advised to quit. Why didn't you?
I'm currently not in a financial situation to quit.
You're not worried for yourself?
I do get worried. Every 6 months when I have to go and do that lung capacity test in case it has dropped. So yeah, I do get worried, yes.
100,000 lives is the cost of inaction.
The epidemic of silicosis in Australia is now so dire, multiple unions have joined forces to ensure the health of all workers is taken more seriously. Tomorrow, they launch a national campaign demanding change.
Tell the government to stop this killer stone.
Regulations around dust diseases needs to be strengthened dramatically. It's not happening at the moment. As a consequence, there are so many workers being exposed every day of the week.
Small changes are starting to happen though, albeit slowly. Last week in Spain, the owner of one of Caesarstone's main competitors, Constantino, accepted a 6-month suspended prison sentence for covering up the dangers of its engineered stone product. It's a rare piece of positive news and is welcomed by tradies like Ken Parker. The 47-year-old developed silicosis while working at Stoneworks, a company that's now fighting criminal charges of breaching its duty of care to workers. What impact has being diagnosed with silicosis had on your life?
Loss of job, loss of house, loss of lifestyle. Can't work. You get used to it. I've got things to do, I've got my kids, and I try, I suppose, not think about it, keep going forward, and happy to be here as long as possible.
How old are your kids?
13 and 19. And yeah, the idea is to see my daughter turn 18. That'd be a start.
Ken has another wish, one that's likely shared by the many Australian workers who didn't realise doing their job was going to lead to an early grave. To save others, he says engineered stone needs to be banned. No ifs, no buts.
Yeah, 100%. It's the only way. Without it, there's always going to be a loophole and there's always going to be a way around it, and they will always find it. So something needs to be done. It's just straight up killing people.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinford. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.